Hey,
Hi.
I could use a story.
In plain terms, a child is a complicated creature who can drive you crazy. There's a cruelty to childhood. There's an anger. That was Maurice Sendak, an author and illustrator most notably acclaimed for his timeless work, Where the Wild Things Are, a children's book published on April 9th, 1963. It continues to be a massive success even past its original release date, influencing generation after generation, including myself, who grew up reading Wild Things 40 years after it was published. It was a massive contrast to other contemporary tales. No hungry caterpillars or saying goodnight to the moon. Just a story about a kid who yells at his mother and then his room turns into a forest and suddenly becomes the hierarchy of a group of unknown horned creatures. At first glance, you may see a bad example of how a child should behave, such as yelling at his mom and terrorizing the family dog, but Sendak knew, before I think anyone else did, that this is not just a bad kid. At one point, we were all Max. Not all of our upbringings involved rambunctiousness and dog terrorism, of course, but in a way we all had moments of emotional imbalance and impulse. This is a story about the misunderstood pain and confusion of a child, and how this pain is important in shaping who we are and who we'll become. An ode to growing pains.
You are now the king, and you will be a truly great king.
About 4 years ago when I started on it, I just had an idea, how to make my version of it, what the book is about to me in my life. But I definitely didn't want to ever do it unless Maurice was comfortable with it, because it's his creation, it's something he made. I didn't want to take it and make it into something that betrayed what it was to him.
Hey. What's wrong?
Acclaimed filmmaker Spike Jonze worked closely with Sendak in adapting the 10-sentence story into an hour and 40-minute film. Sendak was very present on production and applauded Jones' shared vision and approach to the story. A large portion of the story had to be extended and developed to fit a longer running time. Though the simplicity of the story could have served decently for a simple children's film, there was a vision and a thematic presence that Jones can harness from the source material, and even bring a perspective that average audiences would have to marinate within themselves. In Jones' previous film, being John Malkovich an adaptation, they were quirky, mature-themed stories, whereas Wild Things was his first children's film in the broad sense. The question was, could Jones not only successfully adapt a short children's story for a feature film, but could he also respect the author's intent and build upon it? Overall, Jones had a lot of buzz built around the film, and leaked test footage in 2008 had people concerned and speculating, wondering if the creature suits were convincing enough to portray these beasts as real, and whether or not the film was going to be a bastardization of a timeless classic, see Cat in the Hat, for example. But Jones would later prove his cinematic maturity in his award-winning film Her in 2013, a story about a lonely, depressed man in the near future who falls for an operating system. Presentation of complex emotions from individuals with deep connections, regardless of the distinction between human and machine, is an ambitious yet beautifully executed theme. If there's one thing Spike Jonze can do confidently, is present a real and honest look into the human condition and the harsh flaws that may follow.
So what's your story? Why'd you come here?
Well, I'm an explorer, and I traveled a lot. And I traveled by sea.
Right.
I used to travel by air.
So obviously you have no home or family.
I had one of those,
But you ate them all?
No, I just bit one of them, that's all, and I went crazy. And I don't like frozen corn.
Sorry. That's why you left.
I act like I'm a bad person.
Well, are you?
I don't know.
Well, I'm glad you came.
I'll give a brief summary of the film for those who haven't seen it, which, according to Box Office Mojo, most of you probably haven't. It was released on October 16, 2009, and was considered a box office flop, earning only $77 million domestic out of a $100 million budget. The story centers around Max, a young kid who lacks in friends, but more than makes up for his expansive and vivid imagination, but early on shows that he has anger management issues. He lives with his single working mom, who does all she can to assure the best for him, and his distant older sister, Claire. Following an incident where he bites his mother after she tries to control his misbehavior, caused by her attention towards her boyfriend Mark Ruffalo, Max runs away, stumbles upon a sailboat, voyages into the unknown seas, and discovers an island where strange creatures roam, collectively known as the Wild Things. The Wild Things at first want to eat him, but Max convinces them that he has magic powers and that he's a ruler from a faraway land. The Wild Things declare Max as king, and thus begins the Wild Rumpus and the beginning of a new adventure. He develops a connection with the creatures, especially Carol, voiced by the late James Gandolfini.
I want you to be king forever, Max.
Yeah, definitely.
He and the Wild Things bond by building a fort of unrealistic expectations.
We can have an ice cream parlor, a swimming pool with a bottom that's a trampoline.
Hey, where were you? We were just here.
And anyone who gets in there that we don't want there will get their brains cut out. The building will do it automatically.
How does he know which brains to cut?
But during this, Max learns a hard lesson in irresponsibility after a dirt-clawed war goes wrong and causes resentment amongst the Wild Things.
That's cheating! I'm not gonna play anymore!
Do it again.
Okay.
Fight with us.
That's not fair! Are you crazy?
You're supposed to get hit. It's a war.
That wasn't fair! Douglas hit me when I was hurt! You can't hit someone when they're hurt! I quit!
Get back in here right now.
Alex, count to 10. Things will get
Alexander,
better.
don't you
If
cry.
I count to 10, will you be gone, Ira?
Don't you dare talk to Ira the
Knock
way
it
I
off!
do. Ow! That's my eye.
During the last third of the film, Max begins to experience the effects he has on the Wild Things, and how his actions had consequence on the creatures he swore to protect and to keep out the sadness.
I just want to talk to him.
You're out of control.
I'm not out of control.
You were gonna eat him.
No, I wasn't gonna. I don't know, I just said it. Am I as bad as he says I am?
Just go away.
I just wanted us all to be together.
Realizing he needs to go home, he says one last goodbye to the Wild Things, a scene that never fails to cut me deep.
Hey, Max,
Yeah?
when you go home, will you say good things about us?
I will.
Thanks, Max.
Don't go. I'll eat you up. I love you so.
Max gets back into his boat, runs back home, and is embraced by his mother, who still has his dinner waiting for him. The story is straightforward, simple in concept, and often enjoyed more in the mindset of acknowledging the suspension of disbelief, which may be difficult, especially now in this age of hyper-analytical objectivity, where people make 5-hour videos going point by point, analyzing a blockbuster movie for writing inconsistencies and plot holes. I appreciate objective critique. It's what helps us understand technicality and how films are made and presented to emphasize the subjective elements. But in this section, I'm focusing more on the relations between Max and the Wild Things, and how they represent particular parts of the film, and each important part in Max's life before the beginning of the second act. The first 15 minutes of the film are a glimpse into the daily life of Max, and the events leading up to his outburst, and his departure into the land of the Wild Things. The snowball fight and the destruction of the igloo correlates to the dirt clod fight and KW stepping on Carol's head, causing a fight between the two. Max lashing out over the lack of attention from his mother relates to Carol waking everyone up thinking the sun has died even though it's nighttime. Max even utters the exact same words used by his mother against him.
You're out of control!
I'm not out of control! You were supposed to take care of us, you promised! I'll let you out!
Max ripping apart the Valentine he gave to Claire and Carol's destruction of his hideout. Max even makes a heart with a C for Carol to emphasize the similarities. There's even some foreshadowing with the story Max tells his mother about the vampire biting the tallest building and losing his teeth, resulting in losing his other vampire friends. Later in Carol's hideout, we hear him talk to Max about feeling like he's become distant with the others through a simile relating to teeth.
You know what it feels like when all your teeth are falling out really slowly and you don't realize, and then you notice that, well, they're really far apart. And then one day, you don't have any teeth anymore.
Yeah.
Well, it was like that.
The parallels between particular events are done to provide Max, and the viewer, to a third-party metaphorical perspective of the events prior. It gives Max the ability to look upon himself critically and view himself as flawed, but able to grow and become something better, to bloom into someone more self-aware and conscious of their actions towards themselves and the ones they love. Sailing home, Max understands that through all he's done, he knows what he needs to do. And though the Wild Things are about the same as they left off, if not worse, it's not the Wild Things that need the resolution or the satisfying conclusion. It's their king. The previous skeletons in the remains show that there were many other kings that they've had in the past, but in that scene of Max saying goodbye, Judith says,
You're the first king we haven't eaten.
Yeah, it's true.
the other kings may have never learned from their actions. They ended up a lost remain, never to leave the mystical land and sail back to the world they came from, to metaphorically remain as lost as they came. Max is the first to leave the island, the first kid to fulfill the duties and expectations of the Wild Things, even if that means losing them. Overall, the island, the Wild Things, it all comes down to self-reflection and a willingness to deconstruct ourselves. Though the Wild Things loved him so, they knew that Max had to go home, to be the king of his own land.
Max, what's wrong with the fort? Thought you said it'd be automatic.
What?
Well, I thought you said if anybody got in here we didn't want, the fort would automatically cut their brains out.
Oh, well, I thought that then, but I kind of decided that if we know them, they should keep their brains. Even if we don't know them that well.
I think you should apologize to Bob and Terry.
I don't apologize to owls. Owls are stupid.
Carol, that's hateful.
Why would you bring them here? Huh? This place was supposed to be for us. They are not sleeping in our pile.
Gee, you're the best king ever. You've changed everything.
It comes as no surprise that Max and Claire are children of divorce. The father is mentioned twice from what I've noticed in the film, when Claire mentions her going to her dad's house on the weekend, and in the globe in Max's room that reads, "To Max, owner of this world, love, Dad." We are unclear of who the father is, and what the home life was like prior to the events of the film. All we know are the relations between the family, the overwhelming role that the mother has for Claire and Max in maintaining her stressful job, and the mother trying to find new love and continue her life after the separation. Max is clearly showing his emotions on his sleeves more than we could say for Claire. It could be possible that Max had a relationship with his father, maybe a distant one that stemmed the longing for that paternal figure that may end up being estranged. There are many particular things that are caused after divorce. Some kids are resilient and aren't affected by it at all, and live their lives like they always have. In other cases, it could lead to temporary or even lifelong negative changes. According to the Institute of Family Studies, Harry Benson writes, there are two main reasons why the breakup of parents can affect kids negatively. The first is simply fewer resources. After a split, it's hard to make the total family income cover the expenses of two households rather than one. The displaced parent, usually the father, now needs to make extra effort to remain in regular contact with his children. That clearly doesn't happen in many cases. A reduced level of day-to-day father involvement has a particularly negative effect on teens. Meanwhile, the lone parent at home carries the bulk of the responsibility for day-to-day parenting. The second is the way children perceive divorce very differently from the parents. To the parents, the reason for the split is obvious, but it may not be to the kids. One day, mom and dad are at home, mostly getting on fine, maybe a bit of bickering or a bit of a sour atmosphere, but not the end of the world. The next day, they have split up. What on earth happened? Was it me? With Max, it's very clear that given his age and perception on the world around him, the reason for the parents splitting wasn't obvious to him. The changes in the world feeling more and more strange to him makes the idea of escaping to a faraway land feel more inviting and dealing with the reality that he's forced to adapt to. Most kids don't want the things they already know to change. The comfortability of what they already know being taken from them is frightening. Max lashes out because there's no other way he can represent the complexities of what he's experiencing. He takes his mother's attention away from Mark Ruffalo because Max, like most children when a parent brings a stranger to the house, knows that things are changing and he isn't ready for them. He doesn't know why his father is no longer around, and why Mark Ruffalo is in his house flirting with his mom. His world is turned upside down and he feels no control over himself or the life he grew to know. A new chapter in Max's life has begun and he's not ready for it. The island is the fantasy he's created for himself, but because he is learning to criticize himself and observe his own behaviors, his fantasy ends up mirroring his realities, and the utopia begins to crash upon itself. Carol in some ways acts as a representation of not only possible aspects of his father, but Max himself.
I didn't want to wake you up, but I really want to show you something.
Okay.
And on the way, I can show you your kingdom. This is all yours. You're the owner of this world.
The sun's not dead, it's just nighttime.
How do you know? I can't trust what you say. Everything keeps changing. All right, come on, Douglas, we're ripping it down.
Carol, we're not ripping the fort down.
It was supposed to be a place where only the things you wanted to have happen would happen. Come on, Douglas, do what I tell you.
No, we all live here, not just you. It's everybody. It's Judith and Ira and everybody.
Oh, finally.
You were supposed to keep us safe. You were supposed to take care of us, and you didn't.
Carol?
I'm sorry.
That's not good enough.
Carol?
You're a terrible king.
Everything can seem so perfect. It makes so much sense. But when things begin to fall apart, we feel as if things are out of our control, and even when we run away, it could follow us in our dreams. I know this because in a lot of ways, I am Max. I have divorced parents. I felt like I wanted to escape and live in the fantasies that I've created. Growing up with a feeling of loneliness and not understanding why things are the way they are, it's a rather difficult thing to grasp and to deal with. When I saw the film back in 2009, I was around the age of the actor that played Max, and I was going through a lot of developmental changes, and I carried a lot of emotional baggage. During that time, I felt angry as to why things had to happen the way they did, why my family was so estranged to one another, and why the people I loved most were pitted against one another while I was stuck in the middle. I felt very alone. It was like I could understand exactly why Max was so angry and confused. I knew what it felt like to see your world change before your eyes, completely out of your control. The Wild Things encapsulated everything that I felt, and Spike Jonze took a story that I read dozens of times as a child, and turned it into the most honest and heartwarming, empathic story that spoke to my younger self, and even more to my now adult self. It was wonderful to see that I wasn't a lone wolf in my feelings, that there's a pack out there who feels exactly like me. A story to say that it's okay to feel angry and confused, because at some point we were all Max. We all had growing pains. Overall, this film affected me in a way that changed the way I perceive art, especially as I got older and began to experience life in my own empathic conditions. It's an important film, especially for kids who have the ability to encapsulate the emotions that Max expresses, to understand them, and to apply to themselves. I don't want this video to come across as me telling you how this film should make you feel. That ability is rather impossible. Moreover, it should hopefully express the connections and essential elements of childhood development that could speak to troubled youth, that may feel as their outbursts and confusions make them a bad person. Children are highly observant, and very much attuned to their feelings more than most adults may realize. To give them an outlet to think upon themselves, and to ask questions about who they are and why, is essential. All I can personally hope for is a future where people can understand themselves as early on as possible, and to avoid toxic societal standards and harmful normalities. To all the children of divorce, trauma, poverty, etc., there is a pack here for you. There will always be a big pile for you here to sleep in. A wild rumpus for you to express yourself in. You all deserve more than what the world has thrown at you. And to all those kids out there, I'll eat you up, I love you so.
She may contain the urge to run away, but hold her down with soggy clothes and breeze blocks. Citrusine, your feet grip me again. Now to kisses, you ever send a full stop? Do you know where the wild things go? They go along